Hey friends, thanks for joining me here for a tour around Moss Mountain Farm. Today we're in the lower terrace garden. It's summertime. There are a few tips I want to share with you along the way, as well as identify some of my favorite plants that are pushing forward through the heat. So let's get started. Now before we go any further, I want to quickly recognize our garden tour sponsors. A big thank you to Gilbert H. Wild & Son, Sunpatiens, Arkansas Parks and Tourism, Ralston Family Farms, First Community Bank, and Crystal Bridges Museum of American Art. These tours would not be possible without them. Check out our sponsor page on my website, pallensmith.com, for more information. As you may recall, back in late spring, we were in this part of the garden, which is the center point at Moss Mountain Farm, with these beautiful Vitex trees that were just beginning to come into bloom. Well, now they finished flowering completely, but look at this fantastic seed head that they are producing. These spikes of seed are beautiful when cut and dried, and we hang these in our octagonal buildings, and we'll just put just a little bit of varnish on them, just a little bit of sprayed tung oil on them is a natural way that will harden, and the seed will connect and stay attached, and you can use these in holiday arrangements. So this is the time of year we collect some of these beautiful spires or spikes of seed pods. You probably remember the gorgeous purplish blue flowers that covered these trees. The hummingbirds and the pollinators love them. All right, so why don't we step into this west side of the terrace garden. I want to point out just a couple of things, some things we do this time of year that may help you in your garden. We've got some of the, again, pollinator plants in full bloom, but a lot of them are attracting the hummingbirds. One of the things I want to point out, this morning I've been over here doing a little pruning, and I've been cutting back some of these chrysanthemums. Now I love old-fashioned plants. One of the reasons I love them is because, well, they're old-fashioned and they're still around because they've got some merit and they're tough. What I love about these chrysanthemums, and you may be going, oh no, chrysanthemums, I don't want to grow those. Well, we've all seen the bushel mum, those mums that make a round mound. These are true garden mums that go back to the 1930s and 40s. And so we have a collection of about a dozen of these. You can get them at Gilbert H. Wild & Sons. They carry some of these heirloom plants, as you may already know. But we planted just a few plants here last year, and you can see how they've multiplied. Now here in summer, what I like to do, what I've been doing is I've been just clipping the tips of them like this. And what I'm trying to do is get as many new stems to grow, and I'm trying to get them to hold back on their blooming. Now here in the south, what happens is these mums start blooming in the summer. So I like to cut them back so the buds will set and bloom in October and November. So this may not be a practice that if you live in Maine, you want to follow, or if you live in Minnesota, if your chrysanthemums have already set buds, leave them. They're going to flower at the right time. But here, I don't really want them blooming in August. I would much rather have them bloom in October and November when we really need the color in the garden. So staging color, staging that wow factor, and thinking about when these players come on and off the stage is an important part of gardening. So over here behind me, you probably can't help but notice this beautiful Salvia coccinia. I don't really know the cultivar or common name. It's just kind of a common salvia. And this comes back from seed every year. And we just leave it like that and watch for those little plants in the spring. And we don't take them away as if they're weeds. We lift them up and move them to other parts of the garden if we want to start this color and this variety of salvia. Now, if you look closely, you'll see that the bumblebees are loving it. And we love our bumblebees. They're great pollinators. And of all the years that I have worked with gardens, ever since I was a little kid, only once have I been stung by a bumblebee, and it's because I caught it like this and pressed it against me. Bumblebees are very gentle, and so we welcome them in this garden, and they're a wonderful, as I said, pollinator going from one plant to the next. Very helpful in the vegetable garden. So why don't we step over here just a moment. I want to show you another plant that's come along very nicely since we were here last. This is the Agastache. called Blue Fortune. I talk about it a lot. It's a great plant for pollinators, blooms for a long time. If I cut this back, as we're doing with the chrysanthemums, you would get a flush of even new growth. So about half of these, I'm going to come in and I'm going to just cut them back like this, and kind of cut into the plant where I leave some for our friends who come to visit us here at the farm. We'll use these in some floral arrangements, but then what will happen here is we'll get new growth, and with that new growth, at the end of every stem, we'll have blooms again later in the season. So it's always thinking about what's coming next, that sequence of flowering and so forth that goes along. So let's continue our tour. There's some other things over here I want you to see that are really pollinator perfect. And right now we have a lot of wonderful hummingbirds in the garden. This is another salvia, and what I want to point out here, and this is probably something that so many of you already know, but these long tubular flowers like you see on salvias, hummingbirds love. So if you really want to attract them, these salvia species that bloom in summer, salvia loves the heat. It's a member of the sage family, and the hummingbirds really, really love them. Earlier this morning, there were 4 or 5 of them dancing around out here around this particular salvia. What I'd like to do now is let's walk into one of the drying houses. This is an important component of the buildings here at Moss Mountain, the way it works, as it were. We just talked about harvesting some of the Vitex and bringing them in, but I'm going to show you, we're just beginning to bring some of these things into the octagons. These are used for drying all kinds of things. We'll take a quick peek in here, so come on up. So here you can see there's a lot of hydrangea, things that we dry and use in autumnal arrangements. It's also a great place to save those seed. One of the things that you have to do is make sure the seed is completely dry, and then what I like to see is it put into a jar where no moisture or insects or rodents can get to those seed because they're delicious to them. The other way we save them is we'll actually make sure they're dry, put them in freezer bags, and write on the freezer bag what they are, when they were harvested, and then pop them in the freezer. So they're like going through a period of dormancy, just like winter, and then you can pull those seed out and replant them again. But up here you can see, here's some of the wonderful celosia, and all I have to do is just shake some of that a little bit, and you'll see these little tiny black seed that are still there. We were saving these just for the flower blossoms. Here's some of the Vitex that's from last year, and you can see that the seeds actually do hold up quite well, and these are again great in fall arrangements starting in September all the way until Thanksgiving. And of course you can take a lot of these into the holidays. As many of you know, one of my favorites for the holidays is to use the Allium, and this is Allium schubertii. These look like firecrackers, and we plant these every year, and when you come to visit us at the farm, you'll see them blooming typically about the time our early roses start. They come after the tulips and other bulbs, and they last a long time in the garden, and then they fade to this beautiful sort of wheaten color, and they just pull right out of the garden. And once they begin to fade, we like to collect them because we can get storms and water and so forth on them, and they'll begin to decay. So it's important to gather them and get them in a dry place like this. So you can see we got quite a storehouse of these alliums. Here's some other varieties of the alliums in here as well. These are fun to stick into the Christmas tree or to use in dried arrangements. They're really quite a wonderful flower. We also dry hydrangeas of all kinds. We've had a very good year of hydrangeas this year. We're in midsummer, so we have some of our wonderful panicle type hydrangeas in bloom. The ones, the Annabelles, the Lady Annabelle types have finished up, and so we've been collecting those. This is the Annabelle types, and this is from last year. And you can see that even well over a year old, they look very good. So having a drying house, we're also taking the seed heads because they're just coming into flower now. Again, this is well over a year old, but look, it's held itself together very well. And I've hung it on this rack, which keeps mice from coming down and eating the little sunflower seeds, which they love. But these are very interesting in dried arrangements. And sunflowers, as you know, are so easy to grow, and we have so many here each year that we grow at the farm. Two of my favorite sunflowers are Vincent, the Vincent series, Vincent Clear and Vincent's Choice. And the reason I like that sunflower so much is that it actually lasts a long time in the vase, up to 10 days or so. And so with so many visitors coming to our farm here to have lunch and see the farm and the gardens and so forth, and the chickens, we have to have flowers that will last for a long time. All right, so why don't we step outside of this octagon? By the way, this octagon was built using all recycled materials. These are windows that came out of a house that was being pulled down. And I went to the owners and I said, please, before you pull this house down, is there any chance I could buy those windows from you? And they were so gracious, they said, buy them, we would gladly give them to you. And so we used them here in this building to fill it full of light and make it an interesting place. And this is also a fun place to have parties in the fall where we might do apple teenies and pear teenies and things like that out in the garden when the temperatures are cool. Okay, so let's head on back out. You'll see some areas that we have cleared. Some of the early spring things have already finished, and so we are now planting more sunflowers for our visitors for the fall. We're planting another crop of zinnias and marigolds because, well, I love them, and they will mature very quickly in 60 days or so. They'll from seed to bloom, which is really quite astonishing. The warm temperatures and give them moist soil and a modicum of fertilizer using our organic approach. They grow very, very quickly. What I would love to do is take you through the tunnel here. Last time we saw how it was knitting together. It's knitted together even more since we went under the tunnel of muscadines. This is a cultivar of the wild grape from America, and you can see there's all kinds of the grapes now up here, and many have fallen to the ground, but look at these clusters of muscadines here, and they're beginning to ripen. You see some that are dark in color, and you know, we eat them. This will be our first year to really have enough to perhaps eat. But it's good to have them for, I think, the birds. The birds love to eat them, and it's very important for us to support our bird life here at Moss Mountain Farm. So these muscadines are a part of our fantasticology, if you will, or this sort of amplified ecology, where we're trying to really think about what each plant can do for other plants and as well as for the fauna, whether it's insects or birds or butterflies and so forth. So we'll come on through here. I love walking through a dark, shady area and then opening up into a big bowl of light like we do here. Even in high summer, when things don't always look their very best, I like to use the big agaves as focal points, these big exclamation points in the garden. They're always good, and they always look good. And so we have the big agave with the Angelina sedum growing around the base of it. If you look closely at this Angelina sedum, you can see that it has a almost maritime kind of feel, almost a coral like texture to it. Also here you can see that this is catmint, this is Nepeta, and this one is called Six Hills Giant. And what we can do now is if I come back here now again and cut back the Six Hills like this. Now it's going to look bare for a few weeks. But the idea here is to cut these back. And what's so interesting is that just like I mentioned on some of the other plants, particularly the chrysanthemums, by cutting these back by half, you tidy them up and then they flower again a little later in the season. So this time of year is all about preparing for our fall visitors who come to see us in September, October, November, and then of course for the holidays. But this is a wonderful plant. It's deer resistant and it blooms for a long time. Right now in the heat of summer, it doesn't have a lot of flowers on it. But the flowers it does have, I think, are very delicate and beautiful. If we pause for just a moment, this is really a garden room, and what we've done is we've gone through a series of these rooms and hallways and spaces, some light, some dark, and they're punctuated by elements such as these thujas that create a nice columnar effect. We've got a hedge of osmanthus. Here we're framing the entrance with a pair of big hollies. This is one called Nellie R. Stevens. So why don't we walk around here on this side? Again, we're kind of getting ready for fall now. Hey, here's our old friend, the blue fortune hyssop, still in bloom. Remember, cutting it back will really help. I love shrubs that give not only bloom, but great foliar effect. And this is a beauty bush. I think we've looked at this before when it was in bloom, and it had lots of pink flowers, but it has this gorgeous chartreuse foliage to it, so it makes a really nice accent plant in the garden. Back here, you'll see burning bush. By fall, they'll be spectacular. In the distance, I've got Sarah's favorite crepe myrtle. What I like about this crepe myrtle for us is it blooms late. And so many of the crepe myrtles, which is great to have early. You know, I always advocate this early, mid, and late planting. Again, it's the sequence of bloom, which is so important. Sarah's favorite is a late flowering crepe myrtle for us. Typically starts with Natchez as a white, and then moves to Byers white, and then Sarah's favorite white. And those are the three whites that we have here. And I like the white crepe myrtles because in the summer here it's very warm, and the white is very, very refreshing. It almost looks like crushed ice. So if we come on around, you'll see that some of the hydrangeas are wrapping up just a little bit. We've been cutting these for the house as they finish up and drying them. This is one called Little Lime. It's a paniculata type, but we've been harvesting a lot of those. Early in the spring, you would have seen these beautiful flowering quince in bloom, as well as this is a wonderful plant called pearl bush. The little buds look like pearls on them, and they're just fantastic. But why don't we just wrap up this space here in the coming through the hedge. The hedge here, I know many of you who come to visit us always ask, what is this? This is a hedge called needlepoint, because at the end of the leaf, the point on it here, it's got a little needle. It's a little sharp, but it's not too bad. But I love the shield shape of the leaf and the dark green color. And as my friend Elizabeth Ashbrook used to say, it's very good. It takes the knife, meaning that one can cut it and prune it and shape it into nice dense hedges, and you can create those garden walls. So here in this rondelle, you can see our Sunpatiens are really shining over here. Wonderful annual for flower power in the garden. We have these openings on either side with the eagles that look inward to this space. This is an area where our tour guests gather and get a little bit of an orientation of what they're about to see in the way of the terrace gardens, or by going across Swan Pond and over to the vegetable garden or to the hidden rose garden. Well, that's it for today's tour. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. Hey, if you haven't subscribed to our channel, please do. If you like what you've seen, like it, and ring the bell if you want updates whenever we post new content. All right, happy gardening.